All right, let's dive in then. Thank you all for coming. Bug out bags, a terrific way to start a talk. Preppers spend thousands of dollars on these things with freeze-dried food, water filtration, first aid kits, tactical gear, emergency radios, Mylar blankets, paracord, water purification tablets, and then they maintain this thing with the diligence none of us bring to our backups. They obsessively focus on this. They rotate the food every 6 months. They check the batteries in this thing on a quarterly basis. They know exactly where the bag is in the closet by the front door. They have practiced the drill. They grab the bag, they grab the keys, and they're out the door in 90 seconds or less. They have planned the route, the primary route, the secondary route, the rally points, and they have thought through virtually every scenario. The grid goes down, economic collapse, social unrest, nuclear winter, or here in Georgia, regular winter, apparently. And then disaster actually strikes. The wildfire is coming over the ridge. And what happens? Or the hurricane made landfall 6 hours early, or the evacuation order came through. And you know what they grab is their car keys, their phone, maybe the dog, if they remember that far, and they head out, leaving the bug-out bag in the closet. Because in the actual moment of crisis, they don't have time for what they planned on. The disaster they prepared for is not the disaster that hit. They spent years and thousands of dollars preparing for a threat model that doesn't match the reality. Which brings me to cloud portability. I'm here to tell you that you have been preparing for the wrong disaster. For the last decade, a good part of the entire cloud-native ecosystem has been selling you a story, usually of the form that cloud-native is what we have to sell you. It's a story about freedom. It's about portability. It's about never being locked into a malicious vendor. It's about being able to switch clouds whenever the mood strikes you. You pick up your containers, you drop them into a new provider, and you're done. That's the promise. So today, I'm going to show you why that's bullshit. I am Quinn. I help companies not get financially destroyed by their cloud bills. And what that means is I see a lot of cloud architectures, good ones, bad ones, and ones that make me question the very nature of humanity. So today, we're talking about some of the bad patterns. I should call this out because I will hear it on the internet. I have been accused of being an AWS shill from time to time. I've also been accused of being far too harsh on AWS. Usually, I get both of these criticisms in response to the same thing, which tells me that maybe we should up-level some audience members, but I digress. But seriously, if someone claims to love you and then treats you the way that I treat AWS, you should get yourself a partner that wants you around. You deserve better. Now that said, I've sprinkled AWS service names and examples in through this talk because it's what I know best, and if I wanted to fake knowing something that I don't, I would just be an LLM. It's easier. If you want to replace these with Google or whatever equivalents, go for it. I'm not going to sit here and generalize when there are specific services I can mention, which is kind of the point. The argument holds regardless of the provider you pick. I also feel the need to forestall the questions that will no doubt be coming in the form of, well, actually, I am talking to companies who are running their own applications here. If you're a SaaS vendor serving customers across all the different clouds, yeah, you've got to be everywhere that your customers are. And yes, that's most of you, because this conference has gotten so expensive that it's mostly vendors here because they're the ones that can justify the trip to pitch to other vendors. Awesome. Or you're a conglomerate. If you're in different clouds because your M&A activity is, well, we have this company over here, we're sure not going to move it. Great, that's organizational reality. Your stock, I'm sorry, there's a different conversation and talk that gets me yelled at in those rooms. This talk is for everyone else. So before anyone raises their hand with, well, what about my specific edge case? Collectively as a society, we are losing the ability to evaluate critically the things that we read and decide, oh, this thing is not targeted especially to me, therefore I need to chime in and say that. That is depressingly common. Please be better than this. If the advice doesn't apply to your specific situation, great. You're the exception. Take what's useful, assuming any of this is, and move on. The rest of you, you get a choice. Let's start with a promise that leads to so many folks going down the primrose path here. This is what portability looks like in 2025. Jesus Christ. The CNCF landscape, hundreds of tools and vendors, all cloud native, all promising that you can run anywhere. Kubernetes was supposed to solve this problem and abstract away all the cloud providers and machines underneath, just like Java abstracted away Windows versus Linux versus Mac. Write once, run it anywhere. Except this works in theory, but not in production. Incidentally, this is why theory is the best name you will ever have for your staging environment. Take that one home with you. It's useful in all cases. And look, I get it. Have you ever noticed how every startup with 3 users suddenly decides they need Kubernetes and off they go? They're running 5 microservices that could fit on a Raspberry Pi, but they're out here configuring control planes and node pools and service mesh. Why are they doing this? It's because Kubernetes is a way for engineers who can't pass the technical interview at AWS, Google, or Azure to LARP as hyperscale cloud employees. You applied to AWS, they asked you to invert a binary tree on a whiteboard, and you do what I do, which is panic, and now you're running your blog on a 47 node cluster with distributed tracing and a chaos engineering framework. Great, awesome. You're not solving hyperscale problems. You're cosplaying them. Now, I'm not judging. I once ran a Redis cluster for a to-do app, so we all cope with rejection differently here. It's fine. So anyway, here's the playbook that everyone follows, which apparently comes from Cloud IKEA. Use Kubernetes, abstract away everything, only use the foundational services, compute, storage, networking. Run your own databases, no managed databases, because down that path lies lock-in. Run Vault for secrets. Don't use any cloud provider-specific secrets manager. Run your own observability stack. Avoid managed services at all costs. Stay on the compatible layer. So congratulations, you're portable. You can move clouds anytime you want. You're free. I mean, your cloud bill is about as far from free as it's possible to get, but okay, fine. Let me show you what you just built. It's the Cloud Portability Bug Out Bag. Kubernetes migration runbook that is still in its shrink wrap because it's never been tested. A Terraform multi-cloud module set that was lovingly maintained by an engineer who quit tech in 2019. I hope this email never finds you. I hope you're free. Great. An untested disaster recovery plan that lives in a Google Doc that nobody's read since the sprint planning meeting. A prayer candle featuring some company's head of DevRel, which, by the way, is an amazing swag idea for any of you DevRel folk in the audience. I'd burn one. But you know what's not in this bag? It's a plan for doing anything that isn't wildly aspirational and sounds good on theory but not in practice. And all of this came at a hell of a cost. Because what you've actually built here is a data center that's a festering pile of shit. Now, some people don't like Gen AI related images, but I had to in this case because it's impossible to find a data center picture that's this shitty without a bunch of IBM SoftLayer logos in it. You followed the playbook. You stay portable. You're paying cloud compute premiums, which is way more than colo, way more than on-prem, and yeah, from that angle, the cloud looks wildly overpriced. But what are you getting for all that money? You're patching your own databases. You're managing all the HA and the failover yourself. The backups and the disaster recovery plan is all on you. You're on call at 3 a.m. when PostgreSQL crashes, and yes, that's how I pronounce it every time. You've turned the cloud into an expensive, shitty version of a data center, and there sure are an awful lot of folks doing this sort of thing that claim to be cloud native, but they're drinking data center borscht while talking in a thick accent about the old country. You're paying cloud prices for data center work. And when I say shitty, I'm not talking shitty in terms of reliability. I'm talking in terms of value. You're paying for cloud convenience, but you're getting none of it. But at least you're portable, right? I mean, you have options. You can switch clouds if you need to, except you won't. Because switching means starting over and learning a whole bunch of new things. New IAM policies, new networking quirks, new failure modes. Even moving from one AWS account to another is 6 months of finding all the service quotas that were increased in the first account, but not the second one, and you find them the same way that you test your airbags by crashing into trees. Everything your team has learned about that environment is gone, and you're starting over. And what worst thing you're giving up is knowing how your cloud provider fails you. That is not me being shitty. That is the reality of you have to know how something breaks. Maybe you're thinking, I won't just stay portable. I'm going to go active across 2 clouds. I'm going to run on AWS and Azure for actual redundancy. So congratulations. This is what happens next. You have at terrific amounts of time and money invested in this. You have replaced a single point of failure with 2 single points of failure. Now you go down whenever either cloud has a bad day. You didn't eliminate your risk, you doubled it. And technically it's worse than that because when AWS goes down in a single region, it is headline news all over the world. But when Azure goes down globally, it's just Wednesday. That is not a joke. This is last month, October 20th, AWS took an outage in US East 1. Some of you folks went down. Your customers couldn't check out, your APIs timed out, your dashboards went dark. You spent the day refreshing the AWS status page, hoping for an update that wasn't just more words saying it'll be improving soon now. Any update. 9 days later, on October 29th, Azure took a global outage. Some of you went down. Again, if your company went down for both of those outages, you get to explain to your CEO why your multi-cloud architecture went down twice in 9 days. If you had to write 2 separate incident reports in the same month, if your customers experienced outages from both clouds, great work there, professor. You didn't build redundancy, you built 2 completely distinct failure paths. But yeah, Azure was down globally. AWS was impaired in a single one of their, 38 regions? And yes, it's their important one. But the big story here is that Azure is clearly the most dogshit cloud we have today. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be dunking so much on Azure's reliability here, because their security is also a festering pile of shit. It's also it is the most cost-effective cloud because apparently you just run your workloads in someone else's account. Done. Okay, but yeah, across 2 clouds, you've effectively doubled your attack surface, you've doubled your operational burden, and halved your uptime in return for doubling your team's cognitive load. It's not redundancy that you're building a nightmare for anyone who has to work with it. And here's the thing that nobody talks about, is that your team really only knows 1 cloud in most cases. AWS or GCP or Azure, it is the rare person indeed that has a deep understanding of all 3. So at 2 a.m., when something breaks on the non-primary cloud, everyone at your company is frantically Googling and probably getting a dumb AI response that doesn't even come close to solving the problem. I told you that knowing how something fails is important. This is kind of why. So, okay, well, Corey, going on this path, what about vendor lock-in? What if AWS raises prices 10x, like we just saw from the shambling husk wearing the corpse of VMware, like a skin suit? Yeah, what if they go out of business? We can't be locked in. So, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but you already are. Not to AWS. Not to the APIs. You're locked in by the team's expertise because your team knows AWS IAM. Why? Because they've been debugging it for 3 years counting. They know how AWS networking works. It runs on money. They know where the gotchas are. They mostly involve money. They know the RDS upgrade patterns. You just don't do it, then they automatically update you in the middle of the night and charge you a healthy premium for doing it with extended support. So customer obsessed. That knowledge, understanding how this all works, that is your actual lock-in story. And it's already here inside the house. Switching clouds means just throwing away a lot of that expertise and starting over again and replacing it with frantically Googling for Azure documentation at 3 a.m. Oh, and the guy on the slide is not shocked because of an outage. It's because he just finished getting all those tattoos and then got laid off from Amazon because Business Daddy, not renowned for his empathy. So you get to pick your lock-in. It's the choice you're actually making. You can be locked into AWS managed services, or you can be locked into managing your own infrastructure. You're on call either way. And I want to be clear, you own your availability. That is not a buck you get to pass. The question is what do you want to be debugging when it's 3 in the morning and the pager's going off? I promise you, the cloud providers are better than you are at replacing failed hard drives. That's just a fact. With managed services, you get to figure out, why can't my app connect to RDS? Why is the query slow? How do we handle failover better? It doesn't save you from this. This is the path you go down. On self-managed, you have the same problems. Why won't PostgreSQL start? Why is the disk full? Do I need to run a file system check somewhere? You're playing with database internals, Linux file systems, infrastructure toil. You're debugging it all either way. One of these is a lot closer aligned with your competitive advantage. The other is not. I also have never been a huge fan of this idea that big companies running on cloud are just being financially stupid. They hire smart people at a lot of these places, believe it or not. And they don't tend to sign $500 million contracts when they could wind up doing the same thing for 1/10 the price. There's a concept of total cost of ownership. I don't know, and neither do you. Also, if I have any friends at AWS, I totally want that AWS branded sledgehammer swag, because that is one of the most useful data center things I can imagine, because one of these days, I'm gonna snap. So, okay, different apps though on different clouds. Yes, this makes sense. I'm not suggesting being a purist. AWS's CI/CD offerings are trash. Use GitHub Actions like the rest of us. GCP, it has better machine learning tooling, and it's not particularly close. Use those. Azure has, I mean, they've got to have something, right? Yes.
SQL Server.
Oh, yeah, they have an expensive commercial database. Yeah, terrific. There we go. If it solves the problem, what are we doing with all this money? It's piling up in the office and we have nowhere to put it. Yes, that's the problem they solve. Thank you. Yeah, that's not multi-cloud. That's using the right tool. Nobody's going to call you multi-vendor because you use both Slack and GitHub. Please use those for the appropriate respective thing. If you try and swap them, yeah. And now my DM thread is my commit log. Yeah, I am a terrible coworker. So it's Monday morning. What do you do with this? You pick a cloud. You go deep. You use the managed services that make sense for you to use. RDS, Lambda, DynamoDB, whatever they've got, whatever it is that aligns. Let AWS be on call for infrastructure and power issues at 3 in the morning instead of your team, because you're going to be locked in either way. You still have all the application overhead on top of this that you're going to be supporting in either case, but lock into something that actually stands a decent chance of working. The cloud-native ecosystem has effectively sold you a lie. They said that Kubernetes inherently means portability. Adopt it and you can go anywhere. Abstraction means freedom. It starts to sound almost 1984 if I continue that line, I thought. But you were in many ways preparing for the wrong disaster. You built the bug out bag and you optimized for switching clouds. But the real disaster is when your best engineers burn out firefighting on this stuff all the time, managing weird database failovers at 3 a.m. for the 5th time this quarter. And then they decide, screw it, I'm going to quit tech too and go raise goats. That email will never find me because I will be free. And that is the disaster that you should be preparing for, that somehow never makes it into the total cost of ownership discussions, because people are expensive and empathy is an investment. Stop optimizing for portability and start optimizing to get some freaking sleep. This has been the myth of portability, why your cloud-native app is married to your vendor. I am, and remain, as best I know, Quinn. Thank you for listening to me run my mouth for the last 25 minutes.